Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thank you for joining us for America's Most Reliable Voter, our summit in two parts. As we head into the home stretch of one of the most consequential presidential elections of our lifetime, we will be putting the spotlight on the 50-plus woman voter and the issues that matter most to this important demographic. I'd like to thank our sponsor, AARP, for their support of today's event. They are Black, Asian, white, Hispanic, and of every mixed ethnicity imaginable. They are in America's Deep South and at the zenith of New York Tower penthouses. They are married and they are single and they are caretakers and heads of households, entrepreneurs, clerks, CEOs. They jog and dance, paint, pass culinary secrets to the next generations, and they vote. According to the Pew Research Center, 52% of all registered voters are over the age of 50, and women account for 28% of that number. While they are reliable and consistent voters, they are also taken for granted voters. The first hour of our summit will be all about getting to know this voter and examining who they are and what's on their dashboard. In the second hour of our program, we're going to hear from those creating policies and programs and advocating on behalf of this age group. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, so great today, including members of Congress, mayors, voting rights advocates, economists, and many, many more. And my newsroom colleague, Julia Manchester, who is here in the studio with me, will be leading some of these conversations. Julia, it's great to see you. You know, what I love about today's program, Julia, is that I sort of look at you as my Ed McMahon to me being Johnny Carson. And the folks watching today will get that, right? Millennials, sorry. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillOlderVoters. We are broadcasting live and will be taking your questions throughout the program. As with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. I always laugh at this part. They say that refreshing the page should, in most cases, fix the problem. Never works for me, but hopefully it will with you. My first guest is Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. He is the ranking member of the Senate Special Committee on Aging. As part of his work on the committee, he focuses on policies that support seniors and individuals with disabilities. Senator Casey, it's great to see you today. Let me just, as we're talking about this important voting group out in America that I sort of feel like isn't talked about enough. We talk a lot about millennials, but I'd just be interested in how you look at those voters, what they do, and the reliability of older voters, 50-plus voters in America.
Well, Steve, let me say first, thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank you and The Hill and AARP and all those who made it possible. There's no question that in this presidential election, as is true, I think, of any election, but maybe especially in the presidential, these voters over the age of 50, and as you outlined, the huge percentage of that number that are women may be the vote that decides the election. There's no question that one of the reasons why, and I'm of course biased in favor of Vice President Biden, but one of the reasons he's got a strong position in Pennsylvania is because of those voters. He's getting a higher share of them than Democrats often get, and I mean in a lot of elections. So there's no question about their significance. And I think the reason why they're so key and also so reliable is they are very well informed. They stay on top of the news, and they're very concerned about where I think the country's headed with regard to healthcare generally, but in particular, the broader issue of retirement security, both financial retirement security as well as the health security that should be part of that basic promise that we've made to them.
What can be done on that front? I've spent the last week just calling folks that I know that are in the 55, 56, 65 plus category and asking, what's on their radar screen. And I have to tell you, the thing that comes up, COVID comes up, but really financial anxiety comes up. It comes up a lot. And, we're going to have my friend Nancy Lamont out later, and she's got this quip that I like. She says, the future of retirement for most of our their members, is work. And I'm just sort of interested in how you think we can partner or kind of deal with these financial anxiety concerns of so many older Americans.
Well, certainly the pandemic has amplified and greatly enhanced those concerns for so many. We know that people were across the board were losing health insurance before the pandemic. That number's gone a lot higher, and that affects people in this age category as well. And there's also some longer term, I think, retirement and financial security issues at play, especially for women. I think many of those who are listening today heard those numbers recently from the National Women's Law Center. Just in the months of August and September, out of the 1.1 million people who left the workforce, 800,000 of them were women. So they're the ones who are doing the heavy duty lifting on caregiving. They're the ones who are often leaving the workforce because maybe their spouse is working and they've decided that they've got to dedicate their time to other priorities for the family. So they're leaving the workforce. And I think we got to do a couple of things. Number one, we've got to make sure that we protect and frankly strengthen Social Security. Number two, we've got to close the pay gap. We're told that over time, the pay gap between men and women can result in a woman in her retirement years having $500,000 less than a man. And we've got to pass comprehensive paid leave legislation.
Now, I know that the Supreme Court decision that just came down was not specified towards any category of voter. It was all about all voters, but Pennsylvania was in the news. The Supreme Court came down and made a decision that your mail-in voting rules could remain in place. I'm interested in how you think, the class of voter we're talking about today is going to approach voting, whether it's in person, whether it's by mail, and how this Supreme Court vote has affected, or decision has affected that terrain.
Well, there's no question it was a consequential decision for the election, because what the decision meant is that the Supreme Court was upholding what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court indicated in their recent decision, that the 3 days after the election, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 3 full days of counting, as long as the ballot is postmarked by Election Day. So that impact is potentially seismic. And of course, a lot of people over the age of 50 will have voted by mail. So it's a significant decision. At the same time, it does send, I think, a chill up the spine of a lot of Americans that it was 4-4. And that's why this Supreme Court nomination of Judge Barrett is so consequential on a range of issues. But it gives you a sense of how precarious some of these issues are, whether it's voting and of course the issue we've been spending a lot of time on healthcare, that a lot could be wiped out by virtue of the vote of one more justice.
You mentioned healthcare, and I'd just be interested in how fragile you think the Affordable Care Act is as we move forward. And you're one of the senators that's known for talking across the aisle, for having worked with many members across the aisle. Do you find the Republicans with any sort of set of concerns in terms of what they would put in place of the Affordable Care Act if that were to come apart?
I think the short answer is the Affordable Care Act is in mortal danger now. Every bit as in danger as it was at 1:30 in the morning, roughly, on that July 2017 morning, when John McCain made his determination about the vote and put his thumb down. So the court has, the argument on the 10th is the reason why this nomination is being rushed. I have to say, look, I'm a very reasonable person. I try to be bipartisan. Some days it doesn't work, and on this issue, it's been almost 100% conflict, in the sense that Republicans 10 years ago, or started 10 years ago, to talk about repeal and replace. Replace now is not even a faint whisper. In fact, I think it's become a lie, because there's no serious person who believes that you could do all that the Affordable Care Act did, cover 20 million, all the consumer protections, cover pre-existing conditions, fill the donut hole, do so many things that it did through Medicaid expansion and otherwise. There's no serious person who believes that you can do that a cheaper, better way. So the replace, even if they were saying it, which they're not even saying any longer, is, I think, a big lie. So this is going to be, if it's struck down, this is going to be a continuing fight, because we're the only party that's really made it a priority. I can't think of an example where the Republican Party has made health care a priority. What we should be doing is trying to get to universal coverage instead of fighting about the Affordable Care Act. I mean, it's interesting. Even in the hearing for Judge Barrett, she was asked about the constitutionality of Medicare, and she would not express an opinion. Now, she could have very easily said, well, I'll argue by analogy, just like I said that Brown v. Board of Education is super precedent, Medicare legislatively is super precedent. She could have said that. She could have said something positive about Medicare, but she gave credence to these loopy law review articles that say that Medicare is unconstitutional.
You know, recently had an op-ed published by your acting Secretary of Banking and Securities in Pennsylvania, a man named Richard Vague, and he sort of outlined in numbers, but then their graphic details of what the ending of a moratorium on evictions and what is happening at a certain class of financial status in the country, that there's another tsunami, another economic tsunami coming in. And when you look at the elder Americans, and so many of them are in this financial trap and have been, problem with income and then also paying rent and mortgages, I'm just wondering if there's a literacy and understanding of that, whether you agree with Vague's depiction, and is there an understanding of what's going to happen with this indebtedness and debt and evictions, and how it's going to hit those that are 65 plus.
No, Steve, there's no question that the severity of this can't be overstated. I know that our caucus has spent a good deal of time on it, especially people like Senator Brown, who is the ranking member on the Senate Banking Committee. I haven't read Richard's article. I know him very well, as I indicated. We were talking before we started today. I've known Richard a long time. He's one of the smartest people I know. So I'll have to catch up on that article. But we've heard a lot of testimony, and there's been a lot of analysis of the really severe impact that this economic calamity can have on so many people's lives, especially in the context of the financial insecurity and combined with the eviction question, as well as other ways that people's lives are being upended. And when you combine that with some of the retirement issues that I mentioned a little earlier, that is a toxic mix for people who may have thought even just a few months ago that they would have a more secure foundation.
Let me just ask you finally, Senator, there's a question we have from Maria Goldberg, who's a program director at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. She's an interesting woman. I don't know the answer to it. She says, what are the policy priorities of rural 50-plus women? Pennsylvania is one of these fascinating states. We got the cities, but we got the rural areas. Do you see any difference in the priorities of 50-plus voters in between those different terrains?
Steve, I think they're very similar. I've spent a lot of time in rural Pennsylvania. We've got 48 of our 67 counties that are rural. And in those counties, the issue of health care is I have to say it's an underrated or underappreciated issue by those of us sometimes in Washington and around the country. Healthcare is not just a healthcare access issue, especially for children. Higher percentages in rural communities that are on Medicaid, children on Medicaid, and children on as part of the Children's Health Insurance Program, but also for adults as well. And healthcare, and because of the hospitals in rural areas, becomes a jobs issue and an economic issue, especially if you have the Medicaid cuts that Republicans want and the elimination of Medicaid expansion. You could have the closing of rural hospitals because they're operating on such tight margins. So I would say on healthcare, on retirement security, on infrastructure, on a range of issues, the concerns are very similar to folks who live in other regions.
Well, Senator Casey, I'm not usually into cute stuff, but I have to say that your Twitter and your posting, there's a great, I'm going to just read it. This is my grandson, Max, cutest kid, has not said his first words, but if he could, he'd remind you that Monday is the last day to register to vote in Pennsylvania. It's a very, very cool picture. So all best to you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today, and all best to your grandson, Max, who's, obviously thinking the right things.
Steve, thanks. I'll tell him you said hello.
Great.
Thank you.